Hello and a very warm welcome to another edition of Passions. And today I'm really excited to be joined by David Stark. And I'm not going to try and even get close to describing about David. I've done some research on him, as you do, and it's unbelievable, his background and his career. So I'm going to let David do that because I'm sure he'll do a much better job. So David, very warm welcome to Passions. Tell us who you are and what your passion is.
Thank you, Phil. Nice to be here. Yes, I'm David Stark, based in London, and I guess my passion has always been music, the music industry, which I've been in for most of my life, and playing music as well. I play drums. I've played drums all my life, and I'm kind of in the middle of the music business. I get involved with songwriters, composers, by the nature of my own business, and I've had a long and winding road, as you would say, which also brings me on to the Beatles, because they're one of my passions since I was a kid, and I just put out a book recently about my relationship with the Beatles. So I've got all these strands to my life and career, but it all revolves around music essentially. And I'm still, at my fine old age now, still very much involved in many aspects of the business and pursuing my dreams still. And I guess it is a passion, really. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here talking to you about it. And yeah, I can say that I've done a lot in my life, but I've still got more to do.
Fantastic. Okay, so take me back then. Take me back way back when. Take me back to maybe even your childhood. Do you remember being passionate or being drawn into music at an early age?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Yes, very much so. As a kid, in the, I guess, late 50s, early 60s, where before I was 10 years old, I was already mad about pop music, and we lived in northwest London, and I loved everything that was on the charts, and particularly in those days, I was a big fan of Cliff Richard, The Shadows, Helen Shapiro, Frank Highfield, Roy Orbison back then, all sorts of people. So, even at the age of, I suppose, 7, 8, 9, until I was 10, and then I heard a record in January 1963 by a new band that were being played by Alan Freeman on Pick of the Pops, and I remember it to this day, being in our hall and just listening to this record, and I had no idea who or what they were, but it was Please Please Me by the Beatles. That is the record that changed my life, turned me into a manic Beatles fan right through the 60s, and which I still am today to an extent, but and kind of put me on the road to being in music later in life, and getting involved and meeting all the people, and just having a great time, really. So I've been very lucky all this time. But yeah, it all started with hearing the records back in the day, especially the Beatles, and that was the story of the 60s for me, really. Not just the Beatles, but as you can imagine, from 1963 until they broke up, I kept my scrapbooks all the way through the 60s, Beatles scrapbooks, which I still have, which really tell the story, from all the press cuttings and from photos from magazines, and so I can look at it. That was my life, and I'm so glad I did it, and still have the memories to look at, which is great.
Wonderful. Do you recall what it was about the beat? I asked you this question because I've heard a lot of people say that they had a wow moment when they heard the Beatles. I had a wow moment in a similar way, which maybe mention a bit later on.
Yeah.
But a bit of a wow moment. Can you remember what was it about that sound that created that wow feeling? Was it the fact it was guitars and young guys looking trendy? What was the driver? Can you remember?
Yeah, well, Please Please Me was just such a different record at the time to my ears. It was, yeah, very completely vibrant. You could hear the energy, the harmonies, the guitars, it all blended, and it just obviously affected me. And I just thought, well, this is something brand new, as it affected the whole country and then the world. It was a new sound, and you know, four lads from Liverpool writing their own songs, all their singles written by themselves, and just having that amazing humor as well, very much part of it, as we soon got to discover that they were four of the funniest guys on the planet as well at the time. So, and the image, the hair, you know, I got sucked into it just, you know, by the way they looked, the way they acted, seeing them on TV. And you couldn't get away from them in those early days. And I was just Beatle mad, basically. And, you know, and my mum and my family enjoyed them as well. In fact, we all went as a family to see them live at Hammersmith Odeon, which wasn't until January 1965. But that was the only one and only time I actually saw them playing live, which was a fantastic experience. And you know, thanks to my dad for getting the tickets. It was a great kind of post-Christmas surprise. I wish I'd seen them a few more times, but at least once was enough. And yeah, that was great memory to have. And but then since then, starting in '66, I had a lot of encounters with them and met them all, had a few amazing experiences, and you know, right the way through the 60s into the 70s. In fact, funnily enough, I met John Lennon quite a few times, and as we're recording this in July 2021, it's exactly 50 years tomorrow that I saw and met him for the very last time, when he and Yoko were signing books at Selfridges, of all places, in July 1971, and I was there as part of the crowd, got to meet them, got their autographs on the book. And I'd met him a few times before that, but I didn't have much time to say hello properly. But that was the last time I ever saw him before he and Yoko left for the States just a few weeks later in August '71. So yeah, that was a nice memory.
Amazing. And was it when he got killed, was it a devastating shock for you?
Yeah, that was just an awful day, which over here, well, it was at early hours of December the 9th over here, of course, December the 8th in the States, but December the 9th, I woke up that morning. All I heard, I was with my girlfriend at the time, and waking up for work, woken up by the Capital Radio alarm clock, which I just heard the words John Lennon, formerly of the Beatles. I just froze. I knew what was coming, and I still find it hard to talk about today because it affected me so badly. And so, yeah, that was totally the end of an era. It also happened to be my mother's birthday that day, and wow. I'd arranged to meet her and my brother for lunch, where we lived in Finchley Central. So we still met. I didn't go to work that day. I was working for a small record company at the time. I couldn't face going to work. I was watching TV, listening to the radio. And so we met for lunch, and that was a very subdued lunch, and my mum was very upset as well. So yeah, that was, well, a strange thing was in the evening, I was playing drums in a review put on by Middlesex Hospital. They did this kind of Christmas review every year. They had a nice theatre there, and I was playing drums in the review, and I was in two minds about doing that. But of course, the show had to go on, and we had a good little band, and the show was composed of skits on TV shows and stuff at the time. One of which was a skit on the last of the famous episode of Dallas of Who Killed JR. So that was still in the show, and we're kind of, they're doing the whole thing on stage, you know, taking the mickey out of Dallas. And at one point, I was required to play 3 beats on my snare drum as gunshots in the sketch. Ooh. Which was a very strange thing to be doing on the same day that John Lennon died. Very strange indeed. So yeah, and I think everybody in the theatre felt that when I played those beats. So yeah, and I've kind of got this weird story that goes along with it. But anyway, on to brighter things. We still have his memory, his fantastic music and songs, all his recordings and interviews, amazing humor, and you know, quite rightly, he should still be celebrated all these years later.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that he's left an amazing legacy. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, would they, David, really? So how did you were obviously passionate about the Beatles, you were then passionate about the music. How did you then move into music as a career? Was that part of that passion, driving passion to do it? Or did you just fall into it?
Well, to be honest, yeah, well, back in those days, there was no career guidance, particularly about going into the music business. I kind of hadn't even considered it really. I didn't know what I was. The only thing I was reasonably good at art at school, so I had this idea that I would try and be a graphic artist. But really, I kind of knew I wasn't quite good enough. I didn't have the passion for that. So when I left school, I didn't go to uni. My parents had been splitting up. They got divorced, and it was all a bit of a mess at home. So it kind of affected my brother and I a bit. So I left school in 71, 50 years ago. Can't believe it. And I went straight out to work, and I was lucky. I just saw a job advertised, which I applied for, at Premier Drums, which was the leading percussion company in the UK. And I got the job based in Regent Street as assistant to the promotions manager there. So from school, I was right in at the deep end, meeting drummers and going to gigs and all sorts of places, including meeting Keith Moon, who famously played Premier Drums, and other drummers who John Coughlin from Status Quo, who I know today, and Rob Townsend from Family, all sorts of drummers who were playing Premier. And I was just little me, aged 18 years old, who was going around to meet and greet them. And yeah, my boss said, "Oh, David, there's this new venue opening at in Finsbury Park. It's called the Rainbow Theatre. Would you mind just going backstage and saying hello to Keith Moon?" I mean, can you imagine? As well as a big Beatles fan, I'm an enormous fan of The Who. I mean, I've seen The Who more than any other band over the years. And so, no, that was great. And so that got me into the business, as it were. And yeah, it was a great place to start, I have to say. The only problem was that after a few months, that was a small office in Regent Street, which they decided to close. And they asked me if I'd like to relocate to the head office and the factory at Wigston near Leicester. And I'm thinking, no, it's not what I love the company, but, you know, I'm 18 years old. I'm not going to go and live in Leicester suddenly. So that put an end to my career at Premier Drums. But I went for a few nondescript jobs before eventually ending up working for Dick James Music. And Dick, of course, was the Beatles publisher. Famously, he published them through Northern Songs, the company he started with Brian Epstein. But he'd also found a guy called Reg Dwight, who we know better as Elton John. And when I joined DJM, I mean, Elton was the number one superstar in the world, without doubt. So that was also a fantastic place to be at the time, and got me meeting lots of people who are still friends today, very much so. And it was all part of the journey. And after DJM, I was there for a short while. I ended up in what I call my first proper job, really, in the music business, as the international press officer at Decca Records, which was also not the most groovy company, but they had great artists, heritage artists and new ones. And I had the most fantastic boss at Decca, who recently passed away, and his name was Marcel Stellman. And he was an amazing character, brilliant record promoter. He was multilingual. We were doing all the international press and promotions. And really, he became one of my greatest friends. And yeah, we just lost him at the age of 96 a few weeks ago. But yeah, and we kept in touch, even though I left Decca after about 3 years. We stayed in touch all these years. So for me, the music business has been as much about the people as it has been about the music. And I've made so many great friends over the years. And as people say, it's very much a people business. And what I've loved, it's just, getting to know people and having relationships, and not just in the UK, but worldwide as well. I'm very lucky to have traveled a lot in my career, and I've got great friends throughout the world involved with music. So I have to say, it's an amazing common denominator, and still is all these years later.
Yeah, I remember actually. I am a big David Bowie fan, and I'm pretty sure that he was on Decca really early on in his career.
Yeah, very much so. Nearly everybody started at Decca. Bowie was certainly there with his first album. Yeah. And they also, the only group that didn't, of course, was the Beatles, famously turned down by Decca, which is a little bit unfair on the guy who was supposed to have turned them down, who didn't actually. Dick Rowe, who was an A&R guy, he was still at the company when I was there, and he told me the whole story one lunchtime, and it wasn't just down to him, but he's the guy who got the blame for all these years. But he was a very nice guy, and but as compensation, George Harrison tipped him off about a band that he'd heard or seen called the Rolling Stones. So Dick did okay at the end. As soon as he heard about the Stones, he signed them up. So that was a great decision there.
Wonderful. And how did you actually work with the Beatles in the end as part of your career? Was it something did you just come across them as part of it, or were you working with them in any capacity?
Yeah. No, I never actually worked with them. I mean, I was at Decca, they were signed to EMI, and it was kind of strange because they'd split up by the time I started work anyway. So they split up in 1970. But up to that time, especially from 68 to 1970, was when I was meeting them and gate crashing film premieres and meeting them in some extraordinary circumstances, which I've written a book about it, which is called It's All Too Much. And also this week happens to be the anniversary of the Yellow Submarine film premiere, which took place in July 1968. And I gate crashed the whole thing with a pal, managed to get into the cinema. It's quite a long story. We spent 2 hours on the roof. And then by just luck and what we call chutzpah, I ended up not being given permission by the manager to stay in the cinema, but also ended up, thanks to Keith Richards of the Stones, who was sitting in the second row behind all the Beatles. I'd spotted 2 seats behind John and Paul, empty seats. So I went down there with my pal. I said to Keith, "Anyone sitting here?" And he said, "Nah, it's Mick and Marianne, but they're in New York. You're okay there, mate." So I sat next to Keith Richards, and I'm literally behind Paul McCartney, with John Lennon to his right for the whole of the Yellow Submarine premiere, which was just incredible. I mean, that was my big event with all 4 Beatles at the same time, which just I was 15 years old. I kind of, once I sat down, I thought, well, this is great. This is where I'm supposed to be. So I just kind of acted like I was part of the crowd, which I was, and didn't ask them for autographs, stupidly maybe. But anyway, that was a fantastic night. And yeah, I've written a whole chapter about that in my book. And yeah, I still can't believe it happened, to be honest.
Where can you get the book from then, David? Is it on Amazon and the usual places, or?
Yeah, it is. It's on Amazon, and also it's published actually by a small company in Wales. They're called This Day in Music Books. Good little company. But I put a web page together for people can either order it through them if they want signed copies, or I've got links to Amazon. And also I've recorded an audio book. I narrated the whole book, and it's got some audio extras in there as well. But yeah, if people go to itsalltoomuch.net, it's as easy as that. Itsalltoomuch.net. You'll find me there, and then you can see all the options to buy it there.
Right, I'll put a link in the. I'll put a link underneath as well, so people can see it and get access to it.
Okay, thanks very much.
It all sounds very interesting.
Thank you.
So I obviously I do a lot of interviews. I've certainly done a lot of Passions interviews. I think you're 65th, so we're on a roll at the moment. But bearing in mind we started off and thought we might get 10 or 20 if we were lucky in the first. It was a lockdown project really with Spencer, and won't bore you with the details. But one of the things that I hear a lot, David, is people will refer, and you've done it yourself today, people refer to luck a lot. But I usually challenge it, because people have to make decisions and people have to do things in order to create the situation that they're in. When you reflect back, were the thing, like, I mean, example there of, were you lucky to be where you were in that cinema, or was it the fact that you were prepared to spend 2 hours on a roof in order to get in that cinema?
Yeah, I thought about this, and I think I must have had something at the back of my mind at the time, because I was dressed quite smartly. I had a Lord John Carnaby Street suit on with a kipper tie and a turquoise shirt. I kind of looked the part. So, and my pal wasn't. He was just dressed in a blazer, but we looked quite respectable when we got into the cinema. We looked as if we were guests who had been invited. That was the difference. So I kind of thinking, yes, I must have had something in the back of my mind, but then things happened which I could not have foreseen, and it was definitely a case of luck, but also we made our own luck really, just by I kind of acted as if I was meant to be there, and of course that helps. So and we got away with it. That was the thing. It was the greatest bunking ever, to be honest. So.
Love it. Okay, so was there I mean, you obviously amazing career that you've had. Was there ever a moment during that career, or maybe moments, where you thought, wow, I can't believe this I'm here, or I can't believe I'm doing this? Was there any moment of almost like I don't know, out of body experience or whatever, as thinking, how did this happen?
There were a couple of times. I mean, mostly, I was just getting on with the job. I had work to do, whether I was working for record labels and doing press or whatever. And that was a job, really. but I found myself in some great situations. But then, well, since the last 30 years, I've run my own company, and it's called Songlink, and it helps songwriters and composers get their music out on the market, particularly people writing songs for other artists people who don't write their own material always need good songs. And it's like a tip sheet I've been doing all these years, and the same for film and TV, people composing music for that kind of stuff. But it's got me around the world, and I've been invited to kind of song contests and trade fairs and events. But the one moment where I was thinking, I can't believe I'm here, meeting this guy, standing, talking to him, was when I went to Cuba in 1999 as part of a whole group of people who went, songwriters. There was a big event organized for Western American and British songwriters to write songs of the Cubans. And this was an incredible week, actually, and some amazing names there. If I tell you, we had Mick Fleetwood, Bonnie Raitt, Burt Bacharach, Gladys Knight. I mean, Andy Summers, Stuart Copeland from the Police, Peter Buck from REM. Just so many great names there to work with Cubans, and it was fantastic. And we're staying at the historic Hotel Nacional, a famous place from back in the day. But the one moment where I'm thinking, I can't believe I'm doing this, was when they all gave a big concert at the end of the week. There was a brilliant concert in a place called the Karl Marx Theatre, which was a huge place, about 5,000 seats. It was basically a rundown old cinema, to be honest. But we're all there, and the show was great. And even Woody Harrelson, the actor, turned up. He was on stage. He was joining in the fun. And then, but after the show, we all got put on 2 buses. This is at midnight, and we were taken to the presidential headquarters, and then we all had to line up with armed guards around us in order to meet and greet Fidel Castro. So
Wow.
that was the moment where I got to meet Castro, and I'm standing there talking to him. And actually, I invited him to London, as he'd never been. And I'm thinking, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is unbelievable. And he's talking. This is it. Can you imagine? It's just like one of the moments in my life where I thought that this is it is too much. It really was. But he was great. He was actually very dignified. He was dressed in a suit, not his military fatigues. He looked very smart, and he was meeting everybody on our trip individually. And funny thing, we all had to queue up, and I was in the queue. I was behind Andy Summers of the Police, was in front of me, and Mick Fleetwood was right behind me. So I always thought, well, it was a bit like the old David Frost program, with the Ronnie Corbett and John Cleese, all the different heights. So, and then as we're waiting for him, as Andy Summers is about to be introduced to him, Andy turns round to us and says to Mick and I, watch this. Okay, what's going to happen? And he meets, we're watching him, he meets Castro. He says, oh, the other thing, we'd been told, don't ask for any autographs, no photos, nothing, just meet him and that's it. So Andy goes up to him and says, oh, nice to meet you, Mr. President. I was in the market today and I bought you a little red book. Would you mind signing it for me? Well, which he did. Oh, talk about luck. And chutzpah, then his front was amazing. And I'm watching Fidel Castro signing his book, and I'm thinking, there's no way I can match that. And Mick Fleetwood and I were just aghast. It was incredible. And Andy still tells that story, I know. So that was a moment in my life which, I couldn't have ever have dreamed that was ever going to happen. And now I look back and I think, I can't believe it happened. There you go.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you mentioned obviously
Yeah.
your business, and it's called Songlink, as you said. So is it basically like the heart of it? Is it a bit like Tinder for for writers and musicians?
Yeah, you got it in one. Yes, I am actually a dating agency for songwriters and composers. It's what I do. I find out who's looking for what, and that everybody subscribes. It used to be a magazine. It used to be a little magazine I put out every month for 15 years, and then it's just online the last 10, 11 years or whatever. And I think that's exactly what it is. I make it very easy for people to pitch their songs. I find out who's looking for what kind of song, who the act is, what have they done if they're not famous. And we've had a lot of big names over the years, but these days I guess it's more for the indie artists because all the big names that have their own writer teams and producers. It's very hard to break in these days, whereas back in the day, every artist was pleased to receive songs, from Cliff Richard to Tina Turner to I don't know, Lulu or whoever. But that's what I do, and I compile it every month. And it's been going nearly 30. It will be 30 years. It's 28 years now. So, but I've still got people who've been with me from day one, who are loyal supporters and subscribers, and people come and go. But essentially, people know that I'm the go-to man for the information about who's looking for songs or music for film and TV, basically. So that's it.
Well, you've been around.
It's the longest job I've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's survived the internet age as well, of course. Is it what's your thoughts about what you might call cliche, the state of the music industry now? I mean, obviously it's the changes that you must have seen, coming through from vinyl, I guess, to tapes to CDs and DVDs, of course, and then download. And what would you say is the state? Is it very difficult now to actually succeed? And do you almost have to be on X Factor to have a chance, if that makes sense?
Well, it can help possibly, but it's not the be all and end all. It's changed dramatically. It's not the same industry, but essentially it still all revolves around the song, and great songs are the lifeblood of the industry. And even though the industry is so fragmented, it's so complicated these days with all, I can't even keep up with it myself, especially online and all the platforms and this and that. And, I find it a lot of it very confusing, but at its simplest, if you hear a great song, that is it. The whole point of this business is singers singing great songs, hopefully. And I listen online to stuff, but I also listen to radio. For me, radio is still very important. And if you can get your song on the radio, especially on BBC Radio 2 or any other stations, as a songwriter, you'll still make good money from your PRS on the radio, where compared to the tiny amounts you get for having a song played online. But radio is still a very good earner. And if you've got a really good song and you've got a good record and you get it away on the radio, I still advise people to try and do that. It's so important. And I still enjoy listening to new songs and new music. I tell you what, I'm closely involved with a place not far from you in Liverpool, LIPA. There's the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, which Paul McCartney co-founded years ago. I've been involved with there for the last over 15 years. I give out the prizes to 2 songwriters on every graduation day. I've been doing that all this time, and every year I have to choose 2 of their student songs, and I've just been listening this week to the latest batch, and fantastic work. The standard is incredibly high, and these kids are writing great songs, which I hope will go on to good things. But it's always been a pleasure to do this, to get involved with today's current crop of songwriters, and LIPA's had a great reputation for artists and songwriters coming out of there, and it's also, the standard's unbelievable. When I listen to their recordings that they're doing at the age of 80, well, third years up to 2021, and I think when I was that age and I'm, barely starting to play in a band and, not having any clue about how to do anything, and now they're all making songs totally professionally at that age, and great demos, great tracks, really. And I'm very impressed by what I hear, and it's tough out there. We know it's very hard, but some of them will rise to the top, hopefully. We just hope, that's the whole point of it. You've got to be in it to win it these days, without doubt. You have to prove your worth. If you've got the passion for songwriting, for performing, for singing, whatever it is, then you should pursue it. And my passion has been drumming, but I've always done it on the side. I've played in a lot of bands. In fact, I've been in a great band the last 10 years, and we're still not a fully professional band, although people think we are. But yeah, that's what I love to do as well. And I write songs and music myself. I record over the years, done quite a few. So yeah, I love it all.
And of course, what's interesting now, of course, is that artists and bands can record the whole thing at a very high quality level in their back bedroom or bathroom. That's another thing that's changed a lot, hasn't it, over the years? The ability to produce music. I intimated earlier when you were talking about when you heard the sound. My experience with that was when I first heard Our Friends Electric by Gary Newman in about 79, and that was a synth sounds, and I went out and bought a synthesizer on the back of hearing that sound. And then I had years then of playing synthesizers, played in a few bands and such like. And it was just that one song that inspired me to go out and buy a synthesizer, because it was different. It was so different at the time.
Well, I bought that single as well. It was unbelievable, and just the sound of it, and the combination of the great synth sounds with his voice and the great drums and backbeat. It was a fantastic record. Still is. Absolutely love it. Yeah, and then I was never huge into synth rock as such, but I really appreciate now how many great songs were created and produced back in that era in the 80s. Fantastic amount of great material by so many great artists, and I still enjoy listening to them. I really do. And then I was also before that I was into punk for a while as well. I was in a punk band, believe it or not, and we were called the Blood Group, and I wrote a couple of songs which we recorded, and I loved it all. Just being involved with that at the time was just a great experience. And I played the Marquee once, the 100 Club, and all the clubs around London, and just to be part of that was brilliant. And there's a funny story where actually we played the Marquee. This is in 1976, before the Pistols had really got that big. They were just starting out a bit. And then there was a gig. It was I got a support slot for Eddie and the Hot Rods at the Marquee, and they said, what kind of band are you? And I said, well, we're like a pub rock band. That was before punk stuff I was doing. And they said, okay, we'll book you. And so I got the slot, and we're supporting Eddie and the Hot Rods, the Marquee, the hottest night of the year, without doubt. The place was absolutely rammed. and even my mum came down to that, and it was fantastic. But then it was only years later I discovered that we got the gig because they didn't want to risk the Pistols supporting, because they smashed up the Hot Rod's gear at the gig before. So we got that gig, and then years later I met Johnny Rotten at a function in town, and I told him this story, and he thought it was very funny, and he said, "You got our gig." So that's in the book as well. I have to mention, I've put always a few of these little stories in the book, so it's not just about the Beatles, it's about me and my career as well. Some of the funniest stories. So,
yeah, well, I'm certainly going to be.
So those were great days.
I'm not just saying this. I'm going to definitely get it when we're done here. I think it's, and what interests me as well, of course, is that the truth is, despite the digital age and technological revolution, we still love a good story, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when you think about all the thousands of hours of TV, and they're all stories created from people's minds, amazing drama series. And I've spent most of lockdown, I can't believe, most nights, I just flake out and I'm watching stuff on ITV3 like Midsummer and Poirot and Endeavour, all these great crime series. I've enjoyed watching the whole blinking lot, to be honest, but they're fantastic, and but they're just a small part of it. And there's dramas on every channel every night, and you think of the work that's gone into them, it's a staggering, really. The amount of creativity in this country and other places is just fantastic, and long may it continue, really.
I also think that I always think that if nowadays, if I'm watching something, me and my wife are watching something, and we both turn to each other and say something like, "God, I didn't see that coming." I always think that is like genius in this day and age when so many stories have been told. To be able to write something where you don't see it coming as an audience member, I think is bordering on genius.
Yeah. Oh, very much so. Yeah. Well, I think that was especially the case in that's a Line of Duty, for example, in the first couple of series. Maybe not so much the last one. We kind of was a bit disappointed by the ending, but certainly that standard of writing by Jed Mercurio, just incredible, and we just never saw any of it coming, to be honest, did we? So that was very enjoyable, and yeah, I'm a sucker for those programs.
There was a time, wasn't there, came whereby they started. I can't remember when it was actually, and there must have been a time when it started where suddenly heroes were getting killed off in about the third episode, and you're thinking. I remember with Game of Thrones, wasn't it, that Sean Bean? It was it was like he going. It can't be dead. Surely he can't be dead. Really well-known, famous actors and heroes suddenly started getting killed off.
Oh yeah, I never actually watched that, but funny enough, I can look out my window here, believe it or not, and there's a little mews behind my back garden. And that's exactly where Sean Bean used to live, right there. And I used to see him in the pub occasionally. But anyway, by the way, yeah, nice bloke. Nice bloke.
Of all the people I could have mentioned, there you go. There's a fascinating coincidence. Okay, then to finish off, then David, and I could talk. To finish off, then I could talk to you for forever. But just in terms of your career, when you look back and you reflect on your career, you're one of those people who have managed to make, in effect, a career out of a passion. Is there any tips or advice or insight you could share for people who maybe are not fulfilled in their work and have passions, how they should maybe go about or what they should do in order to potentially increase the chances, at least, of them making a career out of their passion?
Yeah. Well, I think so. If people do have a passion, whether it's for music, for writing, for drama, for anything really, then you just have to try and somehow get yourself into that industry or meet the people who are in it. And it's all about networking. It's very important. And it's been very hard this last year and a half, obviously, to get out and meet people. But online, that's still possible. There's podcasts and webinars and all sorts of things. But as soon as it starts getting back to normal, and they have meetups and in music, there's always been a great networking thing where people get together and organised by, well, for instance, the societies, the Performing Rights Society used to do it. Actually, here in London, we have a networking group called the Waffle Club, which is run by a pal of mine. And it's really just a bunch of us who meet up, who work in music, TV, advertising, mostly in the media, but not just in the media. All sorts of people. We just meet up at a Wetherspoons in town, have a good, good chinwag and catch up for a few hours. So there's nothing better, because you never know who you meet. And I know that out of those meetings, people have got together, books have been published, records have come out, purely because of the networking. So that's one way of doing it. So really, people, you've just got to kind of keep your aim straight as much as possible with whatever you're doing. And there's nothing better than aiming for the top if you can. But if you have got something you're working on which is a bit special, and other people need to know about it, that's what you should try and do to let them know. Really, just try and connect with people who will mostly help you along the way. And I must admit, if I'd known when I was a kid what I know now, that people are just ordinary people in big positions in the music business who I was, oh my God, they're so famous, legends in the business, but they're just ordinary people, and they're mostly all approachable. You'd be amazingly surprised if you've got a good idea, just to contact somebody who might be able to help you along the way. There's nothing to stop you trying, absolutely nothing. And if you get a rejection, you have to accept your rejections in this business as well. And if the first person doesn't want to know, a second person, the third person, you just got to keep going. But I got lucky when I was young, but I'm thinking back, and well, I could have done this or that, or met more people if I thought about it. But so these days, it's all about communication and networking, very much so.
And it's still who you know as much as what you know.
To an extent, but you don't have to know them, but you can get to know them. These days, you just research, get their emails, not to stalk people, but just to, approach people professionally and, with a good attitude. And then hopefully you'll get a reaction, really. I've done the same. I'm doing the same thing myself, even today, with the book, and trying to get interviews and approaching people and giving them ideas. And also, I've just put out a single as well, I should tell you. And I've been doing the same thing with that. I put out a little song of mine, which is a space sci-fi kind of comedy song I did a few years ago. But I put it out to tie in with Richard Branson going up into space and Jeff Bezos from Amazon going up shortly. So it's a little comedy number called Just an Astronaut, and I just put a video together. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm still trying to get interested people in that at the minute. If I get played on the radio, it'll be a bonus.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, David, I've so enjoyed that, really, seriously, not just saying it, as I said sometimes to people. I've really enjoyed that. Fascinating stories, fascinating insights. And thanks very much for joining me today on Passions, and take care of yourself.